We've already talked about I've already talked about this project with my classmates briefly. We've discussed each of our projects with each other. And one of the suggestions that I was getting from most of my classmates was that they want to know why they've remained so popular today, and what some of those current cultural influences or how they've shaped music and songwriting today. So if you could just, I know it's such a broad topic,
Well,
but
it's in many ways a sociological question, because in part it becomes self-fulfilling. But let me give you a couple of potential explanations. One, the Beatles are recording and writing at a point in time when the very nature of popular music as we understand it right now is being defined. Right? They're defining the genres. They're defining. I mean, sure, yeah. Elvis had been around doing some of this. Phil Spector had been doing this. The Beach Boys had been doing some of this, but the Beatles were the big act, right? So what they did at this point in the '60s as recorded music, as we think about electric music, electric rock and roll, and electric pop, as that genre is being defined, they're the ones who are doing the defining. So they have, in many ways, defined for us how we hear pop music. So if you listen to, you turn on the radio and you listen to Christina Aguilera or the Jonas Brothers or whatever, basically you're listening to a genre that a significant portion of it has been defined by the Beatles and the recording process around them, George Martin and Norman Smith and Jeff Emmerich, and all of those other engineers who worked with them, and recording personnel, Mike Leander, all of those guys really helped, and it really is guys, not many women in that cohort, defined how it is we hear popular music, define what that genre is. So that when even though the Beatles are being influenced by people like Brian Wilson and Bob Dylan, it's the Beatles version of Bob Dylan that has become really cemented in for many of us. Bob Dylan is certainly important. He continued to influence lots of people, but it's the Beatles version of Bob Dylan in many ways that helps to define it. Even at that point in time, when the Byrds go to do a cover of Bob Dylan, when they go to do Turn, 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 they're doing a Beatles version of Bob Dylan. It's like, it's, even at that point in time, it was like, you have, to a certain extent, Bob Dylan does a Beatles version of Bob Dylan when he gets the band. It's a rockabilly band he chooses. He chooses Ronnie Hawkins and the Hawks, Levon Helm and Richard Manuel and all these guys. Robbie Robertson. They're a rockabilly band. That's the Beatles again, and now they're doing Dylan tunes, right? So it's like you got another Beatles band kind of going there, right?
right.
So that's one of the reasons. Another significant reason is this is the music of your parents and your grandparents to a certain extent, depending on how you want to count generations. You probably had parents who played this music for you when you were growing up, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So it becomes self-fulfilling. There's a sociological feedback loop going here. Where people are saying, well, this was really good in my childhood, I played it for my kids, now you're listening to it and playing it, and when you have kids, you may end up playing it for your kids, and then it becomes, we'll see what happens with the next generation. It has had a remarkably long and sustained popularity.
All right. So I guess to kind of close up the conversation here, I just want to make a few statements, because sort of debatable and possibly controversial, I guess.
Go ahead, it's your tape.
And if you could support them, refute the statements, and
them.
if you can, ignore them, elaborate if you will, if it's possible. So number one, Ringo Starr was not a good drummer nor a musician.
Ooh.
That's tough, I know.
That's harsh.
Rough, I know.
That's harsh.
Was he better than Pete Best, the original drummer?
Oh yes, yeah. I would definitely say, and then you can. I've actually done some measurements on this. If you look at when they come in and do "Love Me Do," the Pete Best version, the tempo is just all over the place. The Ringo Starr version, Ringo is a little erratic at times, but you realize he and Paul McCartney are still kind of figuring out who's the boss in terms of holding down the beat. Even better version is the Andy White version. It's like rock steady. But I would still say that the Ringo is he had a very particular kind of style. He was perfect for the Beatles in many ways. Some people like to point out John Lennon was given sometimes to just making caustic statements because he liked the sound of caustic. Caustic. He liked the word, the way the ideas fluctuated. So somebody asked him if Ringo was the best drummer in rock and roll, and he said, "Ringo, he's not even the best drummer in the Beatles." But he was being sarcastic. Ringo certainly had a particular style. He had this bizarre kind of thing where he's playing in a right-handed, the drum kit is set up for right-hander, and he's a lefty. So there's always this kind of like imbalance to his drumming. You can always hear a drummer who's listened and been influenced by Ringo Starr because he has these particular kind of drum fills that, how can I describe them? There are gaps in them, so there's a certain asymmetry going on inside them. But they always end up resolving on beat one. So,
the song "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds" is about the drug LSD.
No.
What was it about?
About the drawing his son brought home for him. John Lennon even had said it's not about LSD. It's about the drawing that Julian brought home from school. John Lennon would have been pleased to be able to say, "Oh yes, it was meant to be kind of a disguise on LSD." He would have loved to do that, but he didn't. He didn't say that. It's not true. It's about a drawing.